How y'all doing tonight? Welcome to the fourth Schey Talks. This is going to be an awkward walk across stage, a little twirl for you. After last year, I don't know if some of you guys were here, but it was a bit of a disaster, so I'm thankful you guys allowed me to come back. So, the title of my speech and the whole premise comes from a Brad Paisley song. So there you go. Talk a little bit about myself for a second. You can see Jen, Kristen, Brody, who are all in the audience, some of my best friends. From college, everything that I've done since freshman year has really been geared towards the Schey Sales Center, and it's been a family and a big part of my life. Some of you who are into the night music scene around here might have seen me at Casa or the Skull playing in my blues band. So that's just a little bit about my background, but to add to that, I've been doing social media marketing since high school, so some of the things that I'm going to say might be kind of surprising in that regard, but currently serving as VP of Marketing for the Schey. Wanted to give a shout out to Michaela Montgomery, who made the tickets and the flyers and stuff for this event. Did a tremendous job, put a lot of hard work in for you. So let's take it back to the beginning of social media. A lot of us were probably like 12 years old when it started sneaking onto Facebook, lying about our age because they had that age limit on there, so some of you might remember that. So to me, the purpose of social media when it started was really about connecting with friends and family and talking to them online and playing all those games and stuff that were on Facebook. And as Twitter and Instagram emerged, a lot of things changed. But I think that the original intent was to connect with friends and family and just build those relationships if you have relatives that are out of town. So today, it's a lot different. For those of you who are on social media, the way that I view it is it's kind of a war for attention now. You're constantly fighting to get the most likes and the most followers and the most attention. Everybody seems to think that they're an influencer, a model, or they're famous, which I know I'm not. It's also been very addictive, and I think there's not a lot of separation like there used to be. I think when we were younger and it first came out, we could still go outside and play or hang out or go get ice cream from the ice cream truck or whatever we used to do. I don't remember, but you can see the guy that looks like the little one on Malcolm in the Middle is having a hard time getting away from the computer. So in my viewpoint, there's not a healthy separation anymore between social media and real life. If you have younger siblings or cousins, they're on their phone all the time. They're always on Twitter, Instagram, whatever they do nowadays. So social media for business, I just want to touch on this real quick. Like I mentioned, I've been running the Schey page for about a year and a half now. I have a director who I oversee who does it. I want to differentiate between personal use and business use. For business use, I think there's no problem making your product or your service seem as good as possible and portraying it in the most positive light and trying to get people to make that purchase. So I did want to differentiate that between, for personal use, like I mentioned before, I think that the original purpose was to make memories, build connections with friends. You can see that's my rugby team from high school. And then you see this guy on the right, and what we'll get into later in the speech is that social media and who you are in real life are not really the same anymore. And you can see that in this picture. So trailing off of that, I think that a big part of what college is about is finding out who you really are, what your passion, your personality, and your values are. And I think that some people go through life without ever really finding this out, and it's been a really big challenge for me to try and mold who I am, who I want to be. I think it's also important to consider that this is both positive and negative attributes. So there you see the music stuff again. So who you are online. Obviously for most of us, that's very different from who you are in person. You can see the cat there, thinks he's a lion, and then back to the Instagram model. So why are these different? I think that social media allows you to control how you're perceived, and that's why I put the mixing board there. It allows you to amplify those positive attributes and then tone down some of those things that you don't like about yourself. And it also forces you to compare yourselves to other people a lot more often, because using Instagram as an example, you're scrolling through stuff that other people are doing all day, and oh, they might look better than I do, or whatever it is. You're just constantly forcing that comparison, which I think is very unhealthy. So another thing to consider is, why are you posting what you're posting? I encourage you guys, when you go home, look through your past month or so of Instagram posts and think back to why you actually posted that, whatever it was. And to me, it's a pretty simple answer. It's just a matter of incentives. It's basic psychology. You're doing it for likes and followers, which are positive incentives for whatever you're posting, versus not getting a lot of likes would be a negative incentive. So this is really the driver behind social media, It's just that constant carrot on a stick of, hey, if I do this, I might get more likes, I might get more followers, I might get a shout out. All of these things that are viewed as positive aren't necessarily positive. So back to the Brad Paisley piece of who you are versus real life versus online. I was in Arizona doing an internship over the summer, and I had a lot of free time on my hand. I was in the desert, so there wasn't a lot to really do. So I was thinking about, once again, why am I posting what I'm posting? Am I being who I really want to be on my Instagram and everything else? So the first question, and I want you guys to take a second to think about it. Are you posting what you're posting because it's something that you care about, or are you posting it because you think that other people care about it and you're going to get that external validation from those likes? For me, I know that I was doing a lot of things for likes. Still am to a certain extent, but I'm trying not to. Second question. I was very, very bad about this. Have you ever deleted something because you didn't get the reaction that you hoped for? And in a lot of cases, this is something that I liked that other people didn't really seem to care about, and it was causing a lot of damage personally because I felt like people didn't care about anything that I was doing. The third one, and this might seem ridiculous to some of the older people in the room who are just kind of spotty Facebook users. Has your Instagram ever influenced your mood or self-esteem based on the outcome of something that you posted? And that, it might seem silly, but I think for some of the younger people in the room, that is a very real thing. So the danger of this to me, in the short term, is you're really caring too much about what other people think, and you're going to start posting things because you think other people care about them, and it's not something that you truly care about and you want to project out in the world. You're just doing it for that external validation. So I would definitely encourage you to find out who you are first and foremost, and then start making that reflected in who you are online. So long term, I think that not only are you going to continue to do those things, I think long term it influences your actions. I think that it can change who you are as a person. It becomes very diluted because you're seeing that validation from other people because, oh, I see that people like this thing that I'm doing. I'm going to do more of that and less of what I actually like to do. So my prediction is the separation is going to continue to get larger between who people are in real life and who they are online. I think there's going to be really no difference with this next generation of kids growing up. I think that they're not going to have a life without social media. It's just going to be constantly posting, and it's going to be a digital you versus who you are actually. On the flip side of that, I think that a lot of people are going to stop using social media altogether. There's a lot of negative aspects besides the ones that I talked about in terms of it being addicting. People are getting annoyed with the advertising on Facebook and Instagram, things like that. I've already seen a lot of family members and people I connected with from high school stop using it for those reasons. So my decision is kind of on the flip side of what we talked about earlier. I decided when I was in Arizona before I came back to school that I'm only going to post about things that I care about, people I love, family, building memories, rather than, cool, look what I'm doing. And I want to be accepted by my followers that most of them I don't even know and don't care about me. So that was my epiphany that I had is I'm going to try and be who I am, and I want my Instagram to be a true reflection of that. So ultimately, it's up to you guys what you choose to do with this. Once again, it was just an epiphany that I had and some perspective that I realized while I was in Arizona. Ultimately, you can choose to do that, and if you do get a lot of happiness from getting a bunch of likes, that's great, that's your choice. It's merely a suggestion, but I think just general good advice is to try and be yourself, and then once again have that be reflected. Live your truth, and don't allow social media to be a currency for your self-worth.
Thank you so much, Cole. So for our next speaker, let's welcome to the stage Brandon DiLorenzo.
All right, hi guys. I wanted to take the time tonight to tell you guys a story about a difficult time in my life and some of the key takeaways that I learned from it. So my story begins on a bright, sunny afternoon in a wonderful little town of Athens, Ohio, where I was doing something that I had never done before. I was moving into college. Just the day before, I had packed my things, broken up with my girlfriend, and bid goodbye to my friends in a tearful farewell. Despite that, I was optimistic and felt ready to begin this new and exciting chapter in my life. I was so sure that I was going to come to school and thrive, instantly click with my roommate, make a bunch of close friends, and generally be really happy. Whew, was I wrong about that? I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. My first semester of college kind of sucked. It's hard to pinpoint what exactly made it so challenging for me. I just had a lot tougher time adjusting than I thought I would. One of the things that made it so challenging for me was seeing how well other people were doing. Not just other students at OU, but my friends from home as well. A majority of them went off and had the sort of experience that I thought that I was going to have. And this was really difficult for me as I did not immediately find a close group of friends, and that sense of loneliness made me wonder if I truly was a good fit at OU. The thought of transferring had crossed my mind on numerous occasions, and if not for one of my close friends from home who also came here, and my freshman cohort within the honors program, I just might have. One of my big struggles during my first semester was that I kept having intrusive thoughts. These intrusive thoughts were usually about how I loathed this new setting, the new situation that I was in, and how I wished that my life could go back to the way it was before I came to college. I would find myself reminiscing and replaying happy memories in my head, thinking of how much I enjoyed my life before I came to school, which then led me to be more unhappy about my current situation. It was a vicious cycle and one that I had difficulty breaking. To cope with these intrusive thoughts, I would find myself doing everything I could to keep myself busy. And in its own little way, it kind of helped. I went to all my classes, did all my homework straight away, joined clubs and organizations, and stayed on top of my fitness. But I quickly realized that I wasn't doing these things for the right reasons. I wasn't doing my homework right away because I cared about the grade. I mean, obviously that was still a motivator, but not the primary one. It was just something to keep me busy. There would be days where I would find myself going for runs, working out 2 to 3 times, just so that I wouldn't have to be alone with my thoughts. With this realization, however, came the realization that I needed to do something, and I needed to break the cycle. So I did something that I would implore anyone in this room who is struggling to do. I started going to group therapy. At first I met with a therapist one-on-one, but after a short talk, he told me of a group that sounded perfect for me. It was called Act Your Mood, which stood for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. The next week rolled around and I prepared to go to my first session. I of course was nervous, having no idea what to expect. I'd never been in such a setting before. And at first, I felt like a fish out of water. I was the only freshman in a room full of seniors and grad students who were there for reasons different from my own. While they were there because of their difficulty coping with career stress and senior theses, I was there because of my difficulty coping with my thoughts and struggles with finding a sense of belonging here. I quickly realized, though, that it was a safe space and that everyone there was there to help one another. The group was designed to help us pinpoint our emotions and the sources of them and understand how we were feeling. One of the questions that we were asked every session was, what thoughts and emotions are keeping you from being fully present in this moment? This helped pinpoint our thoughts and how they were affecting us even without us really realizing it. I can't go into too much more detail, however, for fear of breaking about 50 different confidentiality agreements. Jokes aside, I learned something in group that I wish I'd realized all along. It's okay to be sad, and it's okay to be anxious. I feel like there's so much pressure in this day and age to be perfect, to have your life together, and to have it all planned out. And going back to what Cole said, I think social media plays a big part in that. Everyone feels like they need to show how happy they are and how successful they are, even if it's not genuine, because that's what's expected of us. And I find myself feeding into that cycle of perfection sometimes as well. I always have tried to be the perfect friend, perfect brother, perfect son, and those negative feelings when I feel like I fall short are really alarming. We as a society have made a lot of progress with regards to the stigma surrounding mental illness over the last few years, but I think we still have a long way to go. As I learned, it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to miss the way things used to be. It's okay to not love what you see when you look in the mirror every morning. But what you absolutely cannot do is let those feelings cripple you. You need to understand those emotions, identify their source, and then be able to tell yourself, these things do not define me and they will not stop me from accomplishing what I want. These thoughts do not make me any less of a person and cannot and will not stop me from achieving my loftiest dreams and expectations. Do not feel like you need to be happy all the time. Don't feel like you need to be this perfect person all the time. And most of all, do not let those negative thoughts and feelings hold you back. You are so much more than your negative feelings and insecurities. These sentiments were echoed time and time again throughout my time in group, and the level of compassion and empathy expressed in those weekly meetings is something I'll never forget. I've since applied those learnings and continue to do so on a daily basis, and I'm happy to report that I'm in a much better place than I was just a few short months ago, and I have those discoveries to thank for it. This was a difficult topic for me to talk about today, but if my story and realizations have had an impact on even one person in this room, I know it was worth it.
consider themselves chronic apologizers. Ah, my people, how you doing? Okay, so let's get started. As long as I can remember, apologizing has been my verbal crutch. When I'm mad, I apologize. When I'm sad, I apologize. When I'm nervous, I apologize. You step on my foot, I'm sorry, my foot was there. I apologize for taking up too much space, breathing too loudly, saying something that somebody doesn't like that I said. You know, any of those things. Honestly, you name it, I have probably apologized for it. So I wanted to start oh, my bad. I have even apologized for being a leader. When I was a freshman in high school, I was elected vice president of my high school Latin club. I know, that sounds really cool. As soon as I was elected, I walked up to my high school Latin teacher and said, "I'm so sorry I was chosen, especially if you didn't want me to be." Seriously, how sad does that sound? So anywho, I continued with my high school Latin political career. I served 1 term as vice president, 2 terms as president. Humble brag. But anywho, I continued to be critiqued for this apologizing. And at one point I was literally told that I would never amount to anything as a leader if I didn't stop apologizing. That hurt. It still sticks with me today. I hear it in the back of my head all the time. So I wanted to start doing some research into why people chronic apologize, why people do it, what's the cause. So I turned to my best friend Google and I looked it up. And the first thing I found was from a source that said, apologizing chronically can be a sign that you are not feeling that you have much self-worth. That's sad. But I figured, okay, there's more sources out there. Let's see if I can find something out there that, you know, makes me feel better about myself. Confirmation bias, right? So I kept looking, and the next source was, over-apologizing can come across as a sign of weakness and indicates insecurity. Shoot. Survey says, I'm insecure. Okay, sorry. I didn't even realize I just did that. So, if you take the time to do some research on chronic apologizing, you find so much information about gender, self-esteem, and how the word sorry has so much power, as in it can seriously interrupt the flow of your conversation or make you appear weak to your peers and coworkers. And that's even confirmed. A psychologist named Beverly Engel, I think it was, said when you say sorry for every little thing, your coworkers might lose respect for you and take advantage of what they perceive as your weakness. I could be getting taken advantage of because of this. It sucks. So I wanted to keep researching, and another thing that comes up is a bunch of WikiHow articles and books about chronic apologizing and how to stop it. So this is like a WikiHow article that tells you to swap apologies for a silly word. I promise I'm not going to do that. So yeah, clearly this is not me. Right? So clearly this is not me having this problem. So, okay, and usually what these articles say is a couple things. So first, when you start to over-apologize, you want to do an apology recap. So after you apologize, take the time and think, why am I apologizing? What am I sorry for? What did I do? And then the second thing is change the language. So instead of saying thank you for your patience, say I'm sorry, or wait. Instead of saying I'm sorry I'm always late, say thank you for your patience. See, that might work, but for chronic apologizer Kelly, who doesn't always realize she does it, for instance, I just said sorry in this speech like a minute ago, that doesn't work. Someone had even suggested that I snap my wrist with a rubber band every time I do this. Also doesn't work, because sometimes it's a nervous tic, sometimes I don't realize I'm doing it. So I wanted to do some research into what the real problem behind chronic apologizing is. So there's this concept called A3 thinking. I'm not going to go into a lot of history about it, but if you want, there's a book on it that's rated 4.4 out of 5 stars on Amazon, so could be a good read. But what A3 thinking says is when given a problem to solve, most individuals rush to provide the best solution the fastest. Yet the nature of A3 thinking requires careful framing of the problem, rigorous analysis of clearly defined and improvable gap, patient observation of the source, and real dialogue with people touching the problem. So basically, you have to spend more time trying to find the actual problem instead of just coming up with a solution, like changing the words, like sorry to a silly word. So I wanted to do some research into, again, more of this. And what I found out through all that was that self-esteem really can cause chronic apologizing and being insecure. So I wanted to keep evaluating this. And I kind of came up with this little equation in my head that higher self-esteem is equal to less apologizing is equal to start researching, I keep saying researching, like what is self-esteem? So self-esteem is defined as confidence in one's own worth or abilities. And what I found out really interesting about this is that there's actually two types of self-esteem. So one, there's global self-esteem, and then there's domain self-esteem. So global self-esteem is how we think about ourselves as a whole. So this is kind of how you evaluate your own self-worth. And when I think about this, I think of how people just generally say, I've got high self-confidence or I've got low self-confidence. And then there is domain self-esteem. So that's the way people evaluate their various abilities and attributes. So that's specifically how you see, for example, your specific physical attributes, how good you are at a skill. So for example, I think of this as like, if I've got a friend and he's really good at singing, he'd have really high domain self-esteem in singing, but if he's really bad at knitting, he'd have really low self-esteem in knitting. So basically what researchers have found through this is that these types of self-esteem affect each other. So it kind of works in a bottom-up approach. So domain self-esteem highly affects your global self-esteem. So what that means, if you take the time to improve on your domain self-esteem, it will overall affect your global self-esteem and lead to an improved overall self-confidence. So for example, our friend here who's really bad at knitting but good at singing, he can take the time and evaluate his singing skill. And he can talk about that he feels good at it, that he feels like he is, and that will overall raise his global self-esteem. The other thing that I want to point out is that self-esteem fluctuates, and that's okay. So if you have a couple days where you're not feeling super great, and because of that you're chronically apologizing, you're getting nervous, take the time and evaluate what you're good at. Evaluate your good skills and take the time to appreciate it, because appreciating those things are really important. So I kind of made up a little story in my head with this, and it was our friend here went to a knitting competition and did a really bad job, and he was really sad, and the next day in choir, he kept apologizing and getting all nervous, and then basically what he did, or what you should all do, is step out in the hallway, evaluate 3 things that you feel like you're good at, and kind of take a deep breath, because it's going to be okay, and that'll help raise your global self-esteem. So in regards to this whole equation I came up with, higher self-esteem equals less apologizing and a better perception of who you are. So if you take the time with your domain self-esteem to help raise that global self-esteem, it'll help you apologize less and help it so people don't have such a bad perception of you and over-apologizing. And the last thing that I wanted to remind you guys is that when it comes to self-esteem, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. So take the time, apologize less, appreciate yourself, because you all deserve it and you're all great. Thank you.